Hello and welcome to my February wrap-up and books I have been reading recently from the end of January to throughout February. So we're just going to get right into it, and I'm going to talk really quickly about some of the books I've read recently. So in my January wrap-up, I ended with The Push by Ashley Audrain. Really enjoyed that book, really good book, but definitely a lot of trigger warnings in that book. And then I was listening to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. There is this girl doing a project for high school, for like the end of high school, and she's going to solve this murder, basically, is what she's saying. And this murder had happened to a girl in the high school a few years before our main character. Let's see, I'm on Storygraph. Before our main character ended up in the high school, so she knew a little bit about it being part of that town, but she wasn't completely aware of all the things that were going on. So the description on the Storygraph is: the case is closed. 5 years ago, schoolgirl Andy Bell was murdered by Sal Singh. The police know he did it. Everyone in town knows he did it. But having grown up in the same small town that was consumed by the murder, Pippa Fitz Amobi isn't so sure. When she chooses the case as the topic for her final year project, she starts to uncover secrets that someone in town desperately wants to stay hidden. And if the real killer is still out there, how far will they go to keep Pip from the truth? A debut YA crime thriller as addictive as Serial and as page-turning as One of Us is Lying. There is now, I believe this is now a trilogy, so I do want to listen to the other ones. So this is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder #1. And Pippa is trying to solve the murder of Andy Bell because, like they said, it seems like case closed. Everyone knows this Sal Singh guy apparently admitted to the murder and then he committed suicide. But she feels like there's something fishy going on there, and that isn't the full truth. So she kind of sort of teams up with Sal Singh's younger brother, and they go through the events of that night and like kind of take apart the stories and the alibis and everything that had happened, talk to the people that were at this party that Sal Singh had been at prior to Andy Bell's murder. They're talking to the people that were at the party and going through the suspect list and stuff, and it was a really good read, or I listened to it and I thought it was really well done. I don't read a lot of YA, I say that, but being part of BookTube, a huge part of BookTube is YA, so I have been reading more of it than I normally would, but I thought it was really well done, and it didn't read too young or anything. She's like at the end of high school. It was definitely YA, but it wasn't like immature or anything, so I enjoyed that. And like I said, I want to continue on with the series. There are parts of it that are like her journal entry logs for the school project, and then there's the parts of the story that are like her point of view. Yeah, I thought it was really well done and I enjoyed it. I don't do ratings. I'm really bad about doing 5 out of 5, 3 out of 5, or out of 10, or anything like that. Like, I just stopped. I never really rated books before BookTube, and then when I was on BookTube, everyone's rating their books, so I started doing it, but I've kind of just gone back to not really doing it anymore. Unless, like I said, it's an obvious 5 out of 5. I also read Milk, A Story of Breastfeeding in a Society That's Forgotten How by Emma Rosen, and she is also a fellow booktuber, YouTuber here, author-tuber here on the internet, on YouTube, and she lives in the UK. Really, really, really good book. I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend it if you are a breastfeeding mother, or you know someone who's a breastfeeding mother, or even like I read it now with my 4th baby, and I still got so much out of it. She gives a lot of facts, but also her personal story. And I did a full dedicated review to that, so go check that out for sure. I'll link it down below. Definitely recommend that for the breastfeeding moms out there, which is going to be me here in a few minutes. And then I also read You by Carolyn Kepnes. I think most people know You by now. I had it on my radar because of BookTube before I knew that there was a series for it, but I wanted to read it before watching the series. I believe it's also a trilogy now. Apparently all the books I've been picking up have become trilogies, but I don't know if I'm going to keep going on in the series. And I just watched the first season of You on Netflix as well, and there's also like 3 seasons, and I think another one's coming out. But they changed so much, like having just read the first book, they changed so much in the first season that I'm kind of like, it's the same story, but enough of it was different too. But you're inside the mind of like this stalker guy, and he's like obsessed with this girl named Beck. And, like, everything he says, he's like, Beck, I did this for you. Beck, look at this. Beck, look at that. And, like, everything he's doing, thinking, saying, anything, he's addressing it to Beck. And it's just a lot to be in his head for 3 books. I feel like it'd be too much. Apparently, this was also a debut novel by Carolyn Kepnes. A beautiful, aspiring writer strides into the East Village bookstore where Joe Goldberg works. He does what anyone would do. He Googles the name on her credit card. There's only one Genevieve Beck in New York City. She has a public Facebook account and tweets incessantly, telling Joe everything he needs to know. She is simply Beck to her friends. She went to Brown University, she lives on Bank Street, and she'll be at a bar in Brooklyn tonight. The perfect place for a chance meeting, as Joe invisibly and obsessively takes control of Beck's life. So he's very, very obsessive, and you get that. And I thought it was really well written, and it was well done and stuff, but it's just a lot to read to be in that obsessive mindset. So it would probably be closer to like a 3.5. It was just a lot to take in. It was good, but there was also a lot of sex in it, like a lot. And that's just not really my thing. I'm also currently reading Volkswagen Blues by Jacques Poulin, translated by Sheila Fishman. Oh, we got this book. It was a mystery book. My friend is in Edmonton, and she went to this like urban farmers market thing, and there is like a bookseller there, and she does like mystery books, so like they're wrapped, you don't know what you're getting. And she's like, can you do one for me and my friend? So the lady picked 4 books, so we each get the same books, and she wrapped them all, and I think she tries to make them all like Canadian authors. So this was the first out of those 4 that we chose to open, and it's from 1984. It's from a Quebec author, so it was written in French, so it's translated. So we're just buddy reading it. We're about halfway through it right now. It's going a little bit slow, but it's easy to read because the chapters are fairly short, but there's not a whole lot of plot really going on. It says, a 2005 Canadian Reads selection. In this classic road novel, Jacques Poulin tells the story of a man in search of his brother. The geographical journey through Detroit into Chicago, onto St. Louis, along the Oregon Trail, and into California becomes a metaphor for the exploration of the history of the French in North America. And the main character, like a lot of times they're just called like Guy. The guy did this, the man did that. The girl goes by Le Grand. Is that how you say grasshopper in French? It's like Sutriel or something. Anyways, she's called like Grasshopper. The Grand Sutriel. The story starts, he's like living, the guy, he has a name, I can't remember, is living kind of like in his Volkswagen bus, and he wakes up to the sound of like this cat meowing, and there's this young lady on the side of the road, and she's like walking by, and he decides to pick her up. She's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm going to search for my brother. It's been like 20 years since he's seen his brother, and this is back in like, this story starts in 1984, so back before like cell phones and Google and Facebook and be able to like search people up. So he's just on this journey from Quebec into, like it says, into California. The lady that he picks up, she is native. So the language from 1984, they talk a lot about Indians, and she's like kind of on a journey as well and learning about, well, she knows a lot about the Indians throughout like the journey that they're taking, like from Quebec into the States. They don't use the word like in a derogatory sense. It's just the word that was used back then for Native Americans, for the indigenous peoples. Even for like the time period and stuff like that, it's not very like I don't find it very disrespectful or derogatory or anything like that, so that's good. And there's not a whole lot going on. Like my friend texted me and she's like, why is he even looking for his brother? And I was like, I don't even know like what the point of this journey is. I was like, it is his brother, so I don't know, he probably cares about him to a degree, but it seems more like a self-discovery story. And this girl like literally just like got in his van, and they're like, let's hang out, let's go on this trip together, I'll help you find your brother. And then they end up at his apartment in Quebec for like a couple of weeks before they start their grand journey, and she's just like staying with him, like doesn't even talk to him about this at all. And then he's like, okay, I'm ready to go on this journey, and she's like, okay. Like, there's no, like, actual conversation. I was like, their relationship is just kind of funny. I like it. So, back to talk a little bit more about the February books that I read, even though it is now March 14th. Hopefully I can get through these February books and then do my March wrap-up. So I was talking about Volkswagen Blues. I just finished a couple days ago in March, but I'll just wrap it up in this vlog since I started it February 6th. And it took me to March 11th. Now, normally it wouldn't take me that long to read a book like that. It was really short, but me and my friend were buddy reading it, so it was like a chapter a day kind of thing on and off, and then we'd go a couple days and be like, I didn't read it, me neither. And it was interesting. It was really slow. I don't know if it was because it's translated or just from the 80s or just that author's style. I don't know. It was very slow and not a lot happened. Each chapter was kind of like its own little like mini, it's not even a mini story, but I don't know how to explain it very well. Each chapter was just telling like its own thing. Like they stopped at this museum and just whatever happens in that museum. Or they see this rock formation, or they're heading towards the Rockies, or they're on the Oregon Trail, or they're talking about this specific character in history, or whatever, and it's just for that little chapter. With all the books that I've been reading and stuff lately, it was a really easy read, so that was nice, and it wasn't getting like too confused with the other books that I was reading. So I'm excited to see what the other 3 books are that were chosen for me and my friend to read from that lady that does like the mystery books at the urban market. And then I finally got to Isn't It Romantic, which came out last like October or something, and I took it out from my library and I renewed it and everything, but I was too busy reading stuff for Black Halloween, and I just did not get to Isn't It Romantic, so I decided to read it in February for the month of love. And a lot of people this is the 4th in the Bromance Book Club series, and a lot of people really like the first one, and then kind of just they're not as great as they go on. But I've really enjoyed all 4 books. I thought they all had something different and interesting to talk about. They talk about the Me Too movement and things like that. I find that she usually tackles issues in your past that affect you now in your relationships and in your life, just how you respond to the people in your life because of the hurts from your past. And one of the books made me cry just because of the breakthrough that the one character had. Isn't It Romantic is the Russian's story of him and his wife. I don't know if it is a second chance romance necessarily. He married this girl that he loved in Russia, and he is an NHL player in the States, and he married her so that, because he did love her, but so she could get a green card and get out of Russia. But they haven't had a real marriage up until this point. So she is planning to go back to Russia, but he wants her to stay. And he ends up getting injured on the ice. And she gets a phone call, they're not even living in the same city. So she gets a phone call from one of the people on the team, his manager or whatever, family relations person, and says that you might want to come and see him. He's quite injured. So she comes and decides to stay for a little bit to help him as he recovers and goes through physiotherapy before she goes back to Russia. So he is trying to convince her to stay in America. Me and my husband decided to listen to Dad is Fat again. So again is not part of the title. We listened to it a few years ago. I think we had 2 children at the time. Now we have 4. So I think it was still funny, but I think I appreciated it more he has 5 kids when he writes the book. I'm we're a little bit more now on his level. And if you like Jim Gaffigan, I would recommend the book. The book is, each chapter is a little kind of essay. It's not like a memoir or a biography or anything quite like that. It's just his observations kind of as a comedian and his observations as a parent. Hilarious. We like it. We thought it was funny. And it's fairly clean. You could listen to it with your kids around for the most part. And it's short. It's 5 hours. Still reading Outlander. I downloaded the audiobook for it and I have 9 hours left, but I'm 73% of the way through it. So that's just going to take me a little while to get through. I also picked up my very first ever Colleen Hoover. I read Verity because a lot of people have been talking about that one. And I am part of a group on Facebook that's just book lovers hangout or something like that. It's you either love Colleen Hoover or you hate Colleen Hoover. Either she writes these amazing books with these amazing twists and they're just amazing, or you think she's stupid and her writing is juvenile or too simple or not creative at all. So I'm okay. And the big one that's been out lately that everyone's been talking about has been Verity. So I'm I need to try this. And I was going to buy it, but I'm no, I'm going to save my money and just get it from the library. So Verity started with this brutal scene. It definitely caught me off guard. I had no idea what to think going into Colleen Hoover. Like I said, people either love her or hate her. And I know she's kind of like a romance thriller writer, or kind of does both. I don't know. And the beginning scene was pretty shocking, like brutal. This guy gets hit and dies, like gets hit by a bus, and like the description of what happens to him and stuff is like he's walking on the street. Quite a bang to start the book. And Verity is about this girl, I can't remember her name, but she is a writer, kind of not like a huge well-known writer. Her name is Lowen Ashley, is a struggling writer on the brink of financial ruin when she accepts a job offer of a lifetime. Jeremy Crawford, husband of best-selling author Verity Crawford, has hired Lowen to complete the remaining books in a successful series his injured wife is unable to finish. So Verity, the injured author, has written 3 books, but it's meant to be 6 books. So she's written 3 and they've done like phenomenally amazing. Everyone loves these books. Just blown up. So now there's like 3 books left in the series to write, but Verity is unable to do so after this car accident. And so they've hired Lowen as like this ghostwriter kind of thing. I think, well, her name would be like on the series, but she doesn't want to become really well known. So she's supposed to spend a couple of days at the Crawford's house and going through Verity's study, like her office, to see if she has like a line out or anything of the remaining 3 books of where she wants the series to go, how she wants it to go, things like that. Lowen has never even read the books that Verity has written, so she's like listens to one of them on the drive up there and then wants to read like the other 2, obviously. What Lowen doesn't expect to uncover is the chaotic office is an unfinished autobiography Verity never intended for anyone to read. Page after page of bone-chilling admissions, including Verity's recollection of the night her family was forever altered. Crawford family is going through a lot of heartache at this moment and a lot of extreme loss in their family. Definitely trigger warnings for loss of a child. So the family is grieving. They have a son that is there. I think he's 5. So in the house, there's the father, his son. Verity is bedridden and unable to like talk or communicate or anything like that. And then there's like a nurse that comes in to help with the day-to-day care of Verity. This autobiography that Verity had written, you're reading it alongside with Lowen, and it is disturbing. And you're just like, I don't like Verity. She's a horrible person. The thoughts she's had. It's so off-putting and gross. And you're just like, this is horrible. And then the way the book ends, I kept trying to, you're trying to like figure it out, like, okay, what really happened? Is Verity really as paralyzed and sick as they say that she is? Was this manuscript real? Did she really have these thoughts and these feelings about her kids and her husband and everything that went on? I thought it was well done. I enjoyed it. I would read other Colleen Hoover books. Definitely very disturbing and a lot of sex. And people talked about that, like, in the comments on that book hangout and stuff like that. It was just, like, really repetitive. And I agree with that. Like, they didn't need to write so much about the sex. Like, in the autobiography, Verity just writes about, like, all the sex that she's having with her husband. And she's, like, obsessed. And a lot of blowjobs and stuff like that. But just, like, Verity's, like, obsessed with it. And that was a little bit much for me. I was like, I don't need to read this scene over and over and over again. So I would definitely do without that. But I would pick up another Colleen Hoover. If you have a Colleen Hoover suggestion, let me know your favorite one to read is. And then I read Queenie by Candace Carty Williams, and I read that because of Black History Month, and I failed to pick up like any books by Black authors that month or about Black characters. I read it like all year round. I'm trying to get better at reading diversely all year round, but this is the only one I have to pick up in February. I was really annoyed by Queenie, I'll be honest. Let me read to you the synopsis first. Bridget Jones's diary meets Americana in this disarmingly honest, boldly political, and truly inclusive novel that will speak to anyone who has gone looking for love and found something very different in its place. Queenie Jenkins is a 25-year-old Jamaican-British woman living in London, straddling 2 cultures and slotting neatly into neither. She works at a national newspaper where she's constantly forced to compare herself to her white middle-class peers. After a messy breakup from her long-term white boyfriend, Queenie seeks comfort in all the wrong places, including several hazardous men who do a good job of occupying brain space and a bad job of affirming self-worth. So they're on this break. Her and her boyfriend's like, we need to go on a break. And she just ends up going and having sex with like all these different men. And I'm like, okay, the way that Queenie imagines this break is going to go is that they've agreed on, she believes that they've agreed on this, that they're going to go on a break for 3 months. They're not going to like really text or talk a lot, even though she tries to contact him more. But they're just going to have a break from each other and meet back up in 3 months and see where they're at and what's happening and if they're going to continue on with their relationship or not. But she just like has sex with so many different men, and like, that's not me, obviously. But I feel like she should have been working on herself more, not just ignoring her problems by sleeping around with these different men. I don't think it's like because there's like sex positive messages and stuff out there in books nowadays, and as much sex as they want with as many guys as they want, and they shouldn't be slut shamed and stuff like that, and that's all great. But I felt like she was doing it like not in a great way. She was just picking up these men off of like Tinder or whatever, and she wasn't using any kind of protection. There's one guy in there who's like incredibly abusive to her, and she just lets it happen. And it's really just, I'm just like, stop it. Just stop. Just work on yourself. And I was just really annoyed with her. And I felt like she was just like really young. But then I realized like I am 9 years older than her. And then near the end of the book, like the last third of the book or so, she starts to go to therapy. And that's like a huge step because it mentions that her family is Jamaican British. So they came from Jamaica. So in the Jamaican culture, like her family, like therapy is like a no-go. You do not go to therapy. You just push that stuff down. So the fact that she's going to therapy is like a huge thing in her life. And I think that's awesome. She starts having like this mental breakdown. Basically, you're just reading her go from like this breakup, and then things just progressively get worse. And she basically starts struggling with like major anxiety and has like a mental breakdown. She finally goes for therapy, and I thought that was really good. And she starts understanding like how to love herself and stuff. So I felt like it redeemed itself in the end. And I was just really annoyed with her for most of it though. But I did want to finish it and see how it ended. I would check out something else by Candace Carty Williams. It wouldn't be high on my list necessarily, but I would check out something else to see how she writes her other characters maybe. But I'd be interested to see like if all her characters are like Queenie or if that was specific to Queenie. I'm glad that she got the help that she needed at the end, and all the stuff that she was going through and the things that I found like annoying or like really bad, that she was just drowning out everything by having sex with all these different men and allowing herself to be like emotionally and even physically abused by these men, that she started to realize like this wasn't good and it wasn't healthy, and she did get help for it. Because like I said, it's one thing to be sex positive and embrace your sexuality and your right to have a healthy sex life with whoever you want, but it's another thing to be like using that as a coping mechanism and not being safe. And she goes to the clinic a few times to get tested, and even the nurse like at the clinic is like, you need to go and talk to somebody because you're just doing so many extreme dangerous behavior in these situations and it's not healthy. So I'm really glad that she got that help that she needed, and the message wasn't just to like sleep with whoever no matter how they treat you. And then I listened to Know My Name by Chanel Miller, and I've heard about this going around on BookTube, and I couldn't even remember what it was about when I started it, but it's about Chanel Miller's breathtaking memoir gives readers the privilege of knowing her not just as Emily Doe, but as Chanel Miller, the writer, the artist, the survivor, the fighter. Her story of trauma and transcendence illuminates a cultural biased to protect perpetrators, indicating a criminal justice system designed to fail the most vulnerable, and ultimately shining with the courage required to move through suffering and live a full and beautiful life. Know My Name will forever transform the way we think about sexual assault, challenging our beliefs about what is acceptable and speaking truth to a tumultuous reality of healing. Entwining pain, resilience, and humor, this memoir will stand as a modern classic. So Chanel Miller was sexually assaulted by Brock Turner who at a fraternity party, and he was a swimmer that had like a scholarship and stuff through his swimming, like that's how good he was, and he sexually assaulted her when she was blackout drunk. And these two guys saw that this man was doing something to this woman in the bushes, like outside, and chased him down and pinned him down and stuff and got her help. She ended up choosing to press charges, and we hear her story and the years it took and the mental and emotional strain of not just the trauma that she experienced on that night, but of the years beyond that night of her doing this fight. And it was an incredible story. I thought it is so important to listen to or to read. Maybe one day I'll pick up like a physical copy of it so I can like highlight or take notes. But she just had so many good points that she made about the criminal justice system and how we treat the victims, and how, like, in the courtroom, everyone talked about how, oh, he's an Olympic swimmer, or could be an Olympic swimmer. He wasn't in the Olympics, but how he's a nice guy. Like, all these, they just lift him up and try to make his character, like, just stunning, and he would never do these terrible things. And then when they talk about her, it's just like she was blackout drunk. She shouldn't have even been at this party because it was actually, like, her sister's sorority, fraternity, her college experience party, and Chanel was already, like, out of that. She's a few years older. Like, she shouldn't have been there. She's been blackout drunk before. She only had, like, one taco to eat several hours before going and getting drunk. And she didn't drink any water and, like, all this stuff. And they're just, like, villainizing her. And the stuff they put the victims through in these situations, and why victims choose not to speak out and not to press charges, and how hard it really is. It was a hard book to read. It was depressing. It was angering. Like, it made me so angry. Like, it just made so many really good points. And she does a victim impact statement for the court when they're choosing to sentence Brock. And I guess it went viral, like, on BuzzFeed and stuff like that. Yeah, I just Googled it, and you can go to BuzzFeed. Here's the powerful letter the Stanford victim read to her attacker. Former Stanford swimmer who sexually assaulted an unconscious woman was sentenced to 6 months in jail because a longer sentence would have a severe impact on him, according to a judge. At his sentencing Thursday, his victim read him a letter describing the severe impact the assault had on her. So I'll share that letter, that impact statement, down below in the description box. And it is read at the end of her book, audibly. It's probably in the physical book as well. It was really, really good, and definitely a powerful read, for sure. And I think men and women and all peoples should read it. It's good for everybody to know this stuff. And that was it for March, or for February. Now I'm into March. So that is my wrap up. The best thing I read in March. February. Oh my gosh. The best thing I read in February isn't a romantic, really fun, easy read. It's not all, like, light and fluffy romance stuff. Like, there is more serious topics in it, but it's not, like, it's not a really, really heavy book or anything like that. So that it was a fun book to read. And I just like those characters and all the men in the bromance book club. Dad is Fat, hilarious. And I did really enjoy Verity. I really did. It wouldn't be like 5 out of 5, but I thought a lot of what she wrote was really shocking. It wasn't necessarily like a thriller, like, with all these twists and turns that you don't see coming. It was a thriller, but I don't know, it was different, but it was shocking. And I did like it. And I would read more Colleen Hoover. Like I said, just too much sex in it. And then a nonfiction was Milk, like I mentioned, which I will link down below for the full review video of that. And then Know My Name by Chanel Miller, definitely worth a watch, or a listen or a read. Comment down below what the best thing you read in February was, and I'll see you next time. Bye!